Okay, live stream is up. PC recording done.
Recording underway.
Backup is rolling.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's remote New York City Council hearing of the Committee on Higher Education. At this time, would all panelists please turn on your videos? To minimize disruption, please place electronic devices to vibrate or silent. If you wish to submit testimony, you may do so at testimony@council.nyc.gov. Again, that's testimony@council.nyc.gov. Thank you for your cooperation. Chair Barron, we are ready to begin.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome to today's virtual meeting of the Committee of Higher Education on the CUNY School of Medicine and Implicit Bias in Healthcare. I'm Councilmember Inez Barron, Chair of the Committee on Higher Education and a proud CUNY alumna. The committee last conducted hearing on the CUNY School of Medicine, or CSOM, in June of 2017, almost a year after it was founded as part of the Sophie Davis School of Biomedical Education. We all have biases that affect the way we live and work in society. While some are blatant, like pay disparities, others are more subtle, and social science data show people are much more likely to encounter implicit biases rather than overt biases. Implicit biases are often unintentional and can affect unconscious belief and can reflect unconscious beliefs about characteristics of women and people of color. Yet research shows that it can be even worse than other kinds. In healthcare, there is a well-documented racial bias in pain assessment and treatment recommendations based on false beliefs about biological differences between Black and white people. A 2016 study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences found that half of trainees surveyed held one or more of the following false beliefs. Black people's nerve endings are less sensitive than white people's. Black people's blood coagulates more quickly than whites. Black people's skin is thicker than white people's. And they're talking about that literally, not figuratively. These false beliefs about Black people's experiences of pain have led to treatment disparities. In the same study, for example, trainees who believed that Black people are not as sensitive to pain as white people were less likely to treat Black people's pains appropriately. A 2012 meta-analysis of 20 years of studies covering many sources of pain in numerous settings found that Black patients were 22% less likely than white patients to receive any pain medication. Last year, lying in a hospital bed and hooked up to oxygen tubes, Dr. Susan Moore, a 52-year-old Black woman who was being treated for COVID, recorded herself sharing an all too common experience among Black people in the United States. She complained that the white doctor at the hospital in suburban Indianapolis, where she was being treated, had downplayed her complaints of pain. He told her that he felt uncomfortable giving her more narcotics and suggested she would be discharged. Being a doctor, in her recording, Dr. Moore showed a command of complicated medical terminology and an intricate knowledge of the treatment protocols as she detailed the ways in which she had advocated for herself with the medical staff. She maintained that if she were white, she would not have gone through that. After her recording circulated among social media, she received care that, quote, adequately treated, end quote, her pain. She was eventually sent home. And 2 weeks after posting the video, Dr. Moore died of complications of COVID. Despite being a medical professional, an expert in pain management needs, Dr. Moore still suffered from the racial biases that negatively impacted her care. Only after the hospital was shamed online did the doctors listen to her. Similarly, in 2018, Serena Williams, a Black top-ranked professional tennis player, best in the world, almost died due to complications shortly after giving birth. Feeling short of breath and due to her history of pulmonary embolisms, Williams quickly alerted a nurse about her symptoms and said she needed a CT scan with contrast and IV heparin, a blood thinner, right away. The nurse assured Williams pain medication was making her confused. After continuing to insist, a doctor performed an ultrasound of her legs, which revealed nothing. Finally, she was sent for a CT, and several small blood clots were found in her lungs. Once again, despite being a world-class athlete, meaning that she was more attuned to her body and her body's needs than the average person, being Black impacted her health care. While Serena Williams survived, she is one of high-profile cases among many Black women who have suffered through or died due to similar circumstances. In fact, in New York City, Black women are 8 to 12 times more likely than white women to die of complications due to birth. If professionals and experts like Dr. Susan Moore and Serena Williams struggle to advocate for their own healthcare needs, where does that leave people of color who don't have medical degrees or world-class athletic ratings? In an effort to address the discrimination that people of color regularly face in assessing patient-centered and appropriate healthcare, CSOM intentionally recruits and educates a diverse pool of students to a 7 years BSMD and physician assistant programs. The school works to expand access to medical education to individuals from underserved communities of limited financial resources and of ethnic, racial, ethnic backgrounds historically underrepresented in the medical profession, and commit to increasing primary care practitioners in historically underserved communities. While the city was a coronavirus epicenter, neighborhoods with majority Black and Latinx residents, as well as low-income residents, suffered the highest death rates. This is personal, and it devastated my own Brooklyn district, which includes one of the zip codes with the highest death rate in the city. So I see CSOM as an incredible opportunity to create a model of best practices that can be replicated across the country to better serve all people. At today's hearing, I'm interested in further examining CSOM's work in recruiting, retaining, and graduating diverse practitioners. I'm also interested in the different ways in which CSOM addresses implicit bias with regard to the climate in its curriculum and via faculty/staff/student development. I'm looking forward to hearing testimony about CSOM and its first class of graduates, especially since we face the threat of Omicron this winter. Now, before we begin, I would like to thank Mr. Omawale Clay, my Chief of Staff, Ms. M. Indigo Washington, my Director of Legislation and CUNY Liaison, Ms. Chloe Rivera, the committee's Senior Policy Analyst, Ms. Amy Briggs, Counsel to the committee, and Michelle Peregrine, the committee's Financial Analyst. And I want to also thank the Sergeants at Arms for all the work they do in putting this hearing together. And since this is my last hearing as a council member, serving in the capacity of Chair of the Committee on Higher Education, I want to say that I have been extremely pleased and privileged to have served in this capacity, to have learned so much more about CUNY and about the systems and the programs and the challenges that it faces. And hopefully we've offered some insight as we've looked at the status of what's happening and faced to the realities of what we need to do to make it better. We've had a series of topics covering, I believe, every aspect of CUNY. They've been very productive and fruitful, haven't always resulted in haven't always given us the results that I would like to see. Particularly, I'm thinking about Hunter College High School and the fact that the president there at Hunter College does not want to see an expansion of the ability of the criteria to address how students will enter. But we're working on that, and stay tuned, there's more to come. But I do thank you all for being here. And with that, I will turn it back to our counsel, Amy Briggs. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Barron. My name is Amy Briggs, and I serve as counsel to the Committee on Higher Education at the New York City Council. I will be moderating today's hearing and calling on panelists to testify. Before we begin, please remember that everyone will be on mute until I call on you to testify. After you're called on, you will be unmuted by the host. Note that there will be a few second delay before you are unmuted and we can hear you. For public testimony, I will call up individuals and panels. Please listen for your name, and I will periodically announce the next few panelists. Once I call your name, a member of our staff will unmute you. The Sergeant at Arms will set a clock and give you the go-ahead to begin your testimony. All public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes. After I call your name, please wait for the Sergeant at Arms to announce before you begin. At today's hearing, the first panel will include representatives from the from CUNY, followed by council member questions and then public testimony. In order of speaking, we will have Vincent Boudreau, President of the City College of New York, and Dr. Carmen R. Green, Dean of the CUNY School of Medicine. I will now administer the oath of the administration. When you hear your name, please respond once a member of our staff unmutes you. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before these committees, and to respond honestly to council member questions? President Vincent Boudreau.
I do.
Thank you. And Dr. Carmen Green.
I do.
Thank you. Now, before we hear from President Boudreau, I would like to acknowledge Councilmember Mizell for attending. Thank you very much. And President Boudreau, you may begin your testimony once a member of staff unmutes you.
Thank you. Chair Barron, members of the committee, I'm pleased to be here. I'm pleased for the opportunity to present the work of the CUNY School of Medicine to the committee. We call it CSOM on campus, so that's how I'll be referring to it. I'm especially happy to say that you'll soon hear from the new dean of our school, Dr. Carmen Green. The CSOM has for some time worked under the leadership of an interim dean, and before that was led by a dean who also served the college as provost, thus dividing his attention and his energy. So for this reason, I think of Dr. Green as almost the founding dean of the school, or at least the first dean who's had the attention and the authority to enact a founding vision for the school. She will shortly describe the mission and accomplishments of the school, and we are proud of them. I'd like to leave you with 2 concerns. First, historical changes in the funding formula for medical schools have adversely impacted the CUNY School of Medicine. And second, we are eager to expand our clinical placements across the Health and Hospitals Network because we see the CSOM as the school best positioned to staff the public hospitals of New York City. So if this testimony is also an opportunity to ask for some assistance from the council, these are 2 areas where we could use some help. So it is now my great pleasure to get out of the way and yield to Dr. Carmen Green, who is a nationally renowned specialist in pain and disparities in pain across different communities. So addressing specifically, Chair Barron, some of the concerns you raised in your introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Green. You may begin.
Good morning, Chair Barron and committee. I am Dr. Carmen Renee Green, and 2 months ago, I became the Dean of the CUNY School of Medicine. located in Harlem, where I also live. We thank you for your ongoing support. I came from the University of Michigan, where I was a full professor with tenure in 2 schools and 3 departments. I'm honored to be the dean, and thank you for the opportunity to provide this update. As the Chief Administrative and Academic Officer for the school, I am responsible for leading the clinical, education, research, and social mission. I lead a high-quality, faculty-driven, and student-centered medical education enterprise, facilitate research and scholarship for both students and faculty, oversee operations and infrastructure, and cultivate philanthropy to support outstanding learners who are healers and leaders. The CUNY School of Medicine has both a master's level physician assistant program and an accelerated 7-year BS to MD degree. We have graduated 2 classes of exceptional physicians. Today, I will focus my prepared remarks on the physician preparation. In an increasingly aging and diversifying society where people of color often die before their time, more health professionals are needed. Primary care physicians are desperately needed, especially in underserved areas. Although the number of people applying to medical school has dramatically increased, the traditional pipeline continues to leak, especially for minorities. The number of physicians who are underrepresented minorities in medicine, such as Black, African Americans, Hispanic, Latinx Americans, and Native Americans, continues to lag behind the representation seen within an emerging minority-majority society. At historic lows, the most underrepresented of the underrepresented are Black men, who are less than 3% of physicians. Overall, we have successfully removed barriers to careers in medicine for those who typically are left out and left behind. CUNY School of Medicine students intrinsically understand the social determinants of health, and they deeply care about underserved communities. They bring this knowledge to their patients in the communities they serve, often in communities where they were raised. We select exceptional high school students from each of the 5 boroughs across New York State. The medical college admission test is a significant barrier for underrepresented minorities. Unlike most medical schools, we do not use the medical college admissions test for entry. Instead, we use a holistic admissions process with excellent results. We are an extremely selective medical school with only 7% of applicants granted admission. The CUNY School of Medicine also brings a value to the cost equation, with the lowest tuition of all New York medical schools. I also note most CUNY School of Medicine students are first generation and qualify for financial aid, significant financial aid. In fact, nearly half have an expected family contribution of 0, making them eligible for SNAP, Pell, and other financial assistance. Yet, our students disproportionately go into primary care and serve in physician shortage areas. Unfortunately, 84% of our graduates also carry a large and unequal debt burden at almost $200,000 upon graduation. Our goal is to be both MCAT and debt-free. The CUNY School of Medicine has an authentic and ongoing commitment to diversity and serving the people. My high school Latin teacher taught me, res ipsa loquitur, the number or things speak for themselves. 34% of CUNY School of Medicine faculty are underrepresented minorities themselves. Our numbers are significantly higher than all CUNY professional schools, all New York medical schools, and the national average for medical schools. The majority, or 57% of CUNY medical students, are underrepresented in medicine. We are number 5 in the country in graduating Black physicians, just behind the 4 historically Black colleges and universities, which also have much larger entering classes. We are also a national leader in graduating Hispanic and Latinx physicians. Our Black Male Initiative is unparalleled, yielding more Black men in medicine than our counterparts. Over 7 years, we create doctors. And the CUNY School of Medicine pass rate on the licensure exam is similar and slightly better than the national average. Our attrition rate is also similar to national norms. We are developing other initiatives to further reduce these numbers. Overall, we have changed the landscape. We've enhanced the primary care workforce and successfully fixed the leaky pipeline. We have created a national model, which we're very proud of, with very few leaks. We are also proud to be the only public medical school in Manhattan. Hence, we are New York City's medical school. Yet, the CUNY School of Medicine exists within an extremely competitive academic marketplace. We educate students with significant financial needs on an ultra-lean, tuition-dependent operating budget. Access to clinical sites continues to be challenging and will determine our ability to grow. While many schools pay for clerkships, we do not. We are thankful for like-minded hospital partners who embrace our mission, value our students' community roots, and understand our students willingly stay and serve in New York. Nonetheless, we could use more partners. I firmly believe this is the most important medical school in New York, and it is a national treasure. However, both our philanthropic support and physical footprint are constrained. We lack scholarships for students and funds to recruit additional faculty who are master teachers, distinguished scholars, and master clinicians. Our research footprint is small and additional investment is needed. The plan is to change this paradigm. We will continue to identify mission-congruent partners who want to invest in a public medical education and research enterprise that is relevant to and benefits New York and its diverse communities. Now, a few brief comments on implicit bias. I have published on the topic and how it impacts learners and patients. Specifically, it contributes to clinician variability in decision-making, leading to health and healthcare disparities, and worse outcomes for minority, vulnerable, and marginalized population. Beginning in the freshman year, all CUNY School of Medicine students receive an annual lecture on implicit bias and narrative medicine. We also provide education on microaggressions, bystander training, health and healthcare disparities, cultural competence, as well as the intersection of the social determinants of health, including race, gender, and sexual orientation. We also provide information on these topics to faculty and staff, including a lecture on implicit bias every year prior to the admissions committee beginning its work. Recently, we performed a full curricular review to insert content regarding power, privilege, inequality, and social justice to enhance our students' learning. In sum, we have a wonderful, triumphant story to tell about CUNY School of Medicine and about our amazing students and alumni. It is an honor to appear before this committee and to tell our story. And I'm happy to address your questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We will now turn to Chair Barron for questions.
Thank you, Dr. Welcome to New York City.
Thank you.
And we're so pleased that you're joining the CUNY University, the CUNY world, the CUNY lifestyle. We wish you well in your position. And for this being your first, we're going to have you baptized by fire. We don't believe in easing in, we jump right in. So it's generally the way that we work. So just know that how we do it. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you.
first we have some just general data questions. And what do you know, can you share with us what is the student teacher ratio for the BSMD portion of the program? And how will the student teacher ratio be impacted for the class of 2028, which had 15 more students than was originally anticipated?
Great, thank you for the question. Yeah, we had a robust class, and we're excited about this class. They're amazing. Our current student ratio is 13-1. In the past, we have had numbers that have approached 90 of entering class. It stretches the system, but it didn't break the system then. I don't see it breaking the system now. Clearly, there are always going to be need for investments, but we're comfortable with where we are, and we can continue to provide, a top flight education for our students.
Do you anticipate that there'll be a need to hire additional staff based on the fact that there are 15 more students?
Well, since we've had this before, well, let me be clear, Chair. We have been functioning on an ultra lean faculty ratio, and we get the job done. We probably will continue to need to make investments. This is a new medical school, as you know, and we thank you again for your support. And so we'll need to make some investments, but we're comfortable with the fact that we can teach the students who have come into our class. Now, I will mention to you that some schools oversubscribe. They purposely oversubscribe. And what they'll do is offer students a gap year to go get a master's in public health. They pay them for that experience. We don't have the ability to do that. We take in what we can handle. Certainly, we would like to grow, but we can take care of the students, and I am committed to doing that.
Thank you. How many faculty members and staff are employed by CSOM, and what is the total disaggregated by part and full-time?
We have approximately 50 faculty, 75 staff, and that's 50 full-time faculty. We have some adjuncts as well. I'd have to look at our numbers here. Let's see here, on page 56. But we have full-time faculty of 50, which is enough to do the work. We do employ, when we need to have additional resources, we do employ adjunct faculty. We're also recruiting some, and I know that President Boudreaux is also excited about some of the people that we're hiring to sort of enhance the work that we're doing. We do not want our students to be impacted any type of negative way. So we're adding to the curriculum that will force us, the community at large, to really think about healthcare quality, particularly as it relates to racial and ethnic minorities.
What is the annual cost of attending a CSOM BSMD program? And do you have it proportional to the MD program compared to the BS program?
Oh, great question. So it costs about $6,700, almost $7,000 for the BS component, which is a bargain, as you would know. But if you don't have, if it's $7,000 or $70,000, if you don't have $7, it doesn't make a difference. So most of the students in the BSMD program qualify for financial aid. And so they would qualify for Pell Grants, they would qualify for the New York State program. In fact, almost 50% of our students come with expected family contribution of zero. So this makes this the lowest income of the lowest income. So they qualify for SNAP. And then about another 30%, so we're almost up to 90% of students who qualify for financial aid. Now, that's the bachelor's component. The MD component, tuition is $41,600, which is the lowest in New York State. With that being said, our students, so the same students who matriculate as bachelor's prepared students now go into the MD program without the MCAT. are no longer eligible for those federal funds. So now they transition into the loan system. And so they graduate with a disproportionate amount of debt and $178,000. So less debt in the first few years, more debt in the last few years. I'll also remind you, and I don't, you probably already know this, but even though you're covering tuition costs, there are other costs of attending, and our students are unlike some of the other students who are in private schools. You can't just pick up your phone and call mom or dad and say, put a little bit more money into my account and get it out of the ATM. So it's covering basic needs.
Thank you. How did the pandemic impact CUNY School of Medicine? And how did it impact your partnership with the St. Barnabas?
Yeah. So there are several components to that question. The first part is that St. Barnabas is one of our partners, and it was disproportionately impacted. As you know, New York City has been the epicenter. We did get some stimulus dollars as City College of New York, which made certain that we can make certain our students received laptops so they could study remotely. Our buildings were closed, which is a problem sometimes when students come from, multi-generational families. They depend on us as a place to study. And the transportation becomes problematic. They don't generally have their own vehicles. St. Barnabas, because of their, the whole conversation about PPE, and I've written about that topic as well. We were a very generous donor, took care of the PPE for our students. And so we're thankful to that particular donor. St. Barnabas didn't have extra PPA to give our students. So there came a point in time in which some of our students were removed from the courses. I think, so that's one part. We also graduated students early in order to help with this pandemic. I'd like to talk a little bit about the wellness side as well. As you know, some of our students come from areas where disparities exist and persist. Some of our students come from areas where they've also, or family members who suffer disproportionately due to the COVID. And then they would go from there, from their families who may have suffered from COVID, died from COVID, and then go into the hospitals where at St. Barnabas was, again, the epicenter. And, doing the best we could to save lives, but watching people die. So there's also been an emotional toll.
How did it impact the course offerings or the delivery of those classes that students needed?
Yeah, a lot of the classes went to
that some of that hands-on or laboratory work that might have been required, that might have had an impact on that as well.
Yeah. So we, like every medical school in the country, we pivoted. I think only the California schools didn't pivot as much because they were used to having the HIV crisis there. And they certainly didn't have the numbers until later. They learned from New York how to sort of address some of these issues. So we pivoted. We had to do things on Zoom, and everybody had to learn how to be Zoom friendly. And the students were acclimated much easier than some of the faculty, but we were able to do it. And, again, it shows up in their exams. Our exams, as far as our pass rate on the exams, are similar to the rest of the national average.
And if I may, Chair Barron, the CSOM on campus, when we started bringing students back in person, CSOM was the very first school to bring the lion's share of their classes back in person. So throughout the pandemic, a disproportionate amount of the in-person instruction was for CSOM students. Partly the delay was we needed to outfit rooms, study rooms, and rooms for them to accommodate the COVID protocols. But long before science or engineering or the humanities and arts were teaching in person, the medical students were back in the classroom.
Thank you.
Thank
And I just add to that, all of our students are vaccinated. So that also made it easier for President Boudreaux to make some of those decisions.
Thank you. Moving to the area of admissions.
Mhm.
According to City College, there were 908 applicants to the CSUM 7-year BSMD program class for 2028. How does that number of applicants compare to previous years? And how do you account for the increase in applicants?
Well, thank you for the question. And I hate to point out, Chair, the number actually is, we took in we had 1399.
1399 applicants, okay.
Right. And that number is increasing across the country, right? The number of people who are applying to medical school has increased. We've always had a large number of people who've applied to our students. Now, this is where, again, one of those little stress points, because I provided you an appendix that showed that we have 6 FTEs working on admissions. And then we have an admissions committee. This year, the number may go up. I mean, our number at date was 750. Gerald was telling me that. So we could approach 2,000 applicants. It's unclear right now, and we'll certainly update you. I want to make certain I answered your question.
Yes, you did. And just the second part, what do you think accounts for that increase?
Well, I think our admissions team, Gerald Ayers and Leonie, they have been just terrific. They have been, doing a lot of outreach. We certainly could always do more, but they're doing a lot of outreach. They've got great relationships with high school counselors. Our product. So, one of the things that when I came here is that a colleague says, that school is a national treasure. Mm-hmm. And they aren't from New York. And so people know about the Sophie Davis model. They know about the CUNY School of Medicine. So, let your work be your resume.
Of those who applied, which you told us the correction is 1,399, how many received admission letters? My data says 102, but if that's not it, you can correct me.
Yeah, so I don't have that number. So we interviewed 341 and we admitted 102 for a class of 90.
What made you accept 15 more than what you had originally targeted? What was the thinking behind that?
I think the part of it was that they were exceptional. You always send out these people and then send out letters, and I think that people recognize the value of a CUNY education. One, students come in knowing they don't have to take the MCAT, they just have to excel. And when I think people do the value equation, it makes good sense. I don't have to take the MCAT, which is actually where lots of Black and brown students struggle, right? They take the exam 4 or 5 times. So to bypass that barrier, and and again, that's where we have a story of triumph. We don't offer the MCAT, which is actually a systemic institutional barrier. And we're the only people who really do this. So we've shown that in 7 years, we can get the same results. So there's a special sauce here, and we're still trying to figure out exactly what that sauce is. But it's led to us getting more students. So we don't turn people away. We sort of budget for that. We planned on 70, we're taking in 90, and we can handle it.
And if I can add as well, if you look at the number of admissions over the course of the 5 or 6 years, last year's admit letters were significantly lower than some of the admissions over the past several years. What's changing is the percentage of students who take that admission letter and choose CSUM over other options that they have. So, I mean, I think one of the elements of this is that we've worked really hard to tell the story of CSUM, and that's starting to resonate, with student applicants as well.
I'm glad to hear you and the dean talk about the systemic barrier of a test that keeps perhaps some of your most talented from being accepted. And I hope that that will apply in the future to Hunter College High School. I think that it is abominable that in this day and age, Hunter College High School still requires one test as the major determinant for students coming in. And because of that, there has been a significant decline in the number of Black and Latinx and people of color at Hunter. And until CUNY addresses that and corrects that, we're going to continue to see that same problem increase, diminish. And you can hear my passion in this because I feel very strongly about it. So here on one hand, you have CSUM, which understands it's a totality of what should be considered in selecting students. And on the other hand, a school that insists, even during this time of a pandemic, and an opportunity to say, hey, listen, we can shift gears, we can do something different, that refuse to do that. So I had to put that in. My next question, according to City College, candidates for the BS-MD program graduating class are from backgrounds underrepresented in medicine. And it's URIM, U-R-I-M, and they defined as students from Black, Latinx, and mixed race backgrounds, the highest ever for the program at 76%. So currently, 57% of CSUM students are URIM, and 62% identify as female, and 38% identify as male. So how does CUNY CSUM account for this increase in URIM applications?
Well, I think that one is the number is over the total class, right? All classes. So that's one. Two, I think there, as I mentioned before, there's a special sauce. And I think people are now really sort of seeing us as value. And the admissions team has really done a great job in regards to it. Certainly, we would like to be out there more. I always have a bit of a growth mindset, but we also have to be thoughtful about what that looks like, because what we do is not easy. It's not easy. So if I were to tell you a story of young people who are in foster care and graduating them, that's a game changer, right? For generations. We do that. We take care of these. So people talk about resilience and grit. Our students have resilience and grit. And my grandfather always talked about, there's 300 million people in this world, and it takes only one person to make a difference. And that's what we're doing. We're trying to make that difference. We're also making certain that their resilience doesn't break. And so this is hard work.
Yes.
Oh, and I will go back to the topic that you just raised about these standardized tests.
Yes.
We are, as the dean said, we are the least expensive medical school in New York State. However, we're in a city where Columbia, NYU, and Cornell has, a pipeline for free medical education. We are getting in that context, in the context of options at these three schools for free education, every year our applications are going up. And it's because we can't underestimate the extent to which the series of standardized tests pulls out young people with potential. And so the special sauce that the dean was talking about is the ability to identify and cultivate talent that gets screened out in these tests. So there's also, I will say, there is an issue of justice here, where why is it that the most diverse medical school, certainly in New York State, the school that has figured out how to not screen out students of color who are exactly the response we need to some of the health disparities you're talking about, why is it that they are burdened with this kind of tuition burden, while surrounded by schools with very different demographics in their student bodies and very different debt burdens when they graduate?
Right.
Well, Chair, if I may add
yes.
one more comment. about this, and thanks, President Boudreaux. I mean, we're taking exceptional students across New York's 5 boroughs, right? We're not cherry picking, right? We are taking students from where they are, saying you have the potential to be a doctor. We're not waiting until they've gotten their head bumped and gotten through the MCAT, and now everybody wants you, right? So I talk about our students as being undervalued with high return on investment. They're high potential students. With that being said, we are 20 blocks from Columbia, right? I'm new here, so it's 20 blocks, right? And, I come from the University of Michigan, which is very much a private looking, public, they call it a public-private. I am very aware, I've sat on admissions committees there and other places. Quite frankly, the students who are being admitted to many of the other majority medical schools are kids like ours they're not first generation, they're second or third generation. Their parents, and disproportionately in medicine, their parents are physicians. That's not the case here. And so again, we have a really special story. But with that being said, for me personally, Carmen Green, it's problematic that my students take the bus 2 hours one way or public transportation to get an education and then have to pay for that, go disproportionately, serve in the community that they came from, New York, and then in physician shortage areas. Whereas other schools, I'm not mad at them, are tuition free, okay? Regardless whether or not they, a student needs to have their tuition waived. And they walk out with no debt, and they go and serve in other places in specialty care. So I think that's a fundamental issue of fairness. Now, with that being said, we need, people of color need neurosurgeons as well, and people who understand those principles. So, but we are disproportionately serving the people, and I'm proud of that. It's an honor to be the dean.
Yes, it is. And CUNY is my great love because, as I said in my introduction, I am a CUNY alumna. I did go to Hunter, class of January 1967. And had I not had that opportunity to get an education, I would have had a different path, obviously. But I was able to have that education because CUNY was free. I didn't have to pay any tuition. So years back, CUNY was free if you had a B or better average, and you only had to worry about your books and transportation and food only. But that's the only responsibilities you had, the financial burdens. So CUNY is a significant part of my training and preparation to be where I am. And just for your information, prior to being a legislator, I was a teacher in the New York City Board of Education. And that's my great love. And that's my passion. And that's what I do best. I went to the post office yesterday to mail a letter. And the clerk said, "Baron, you were my daughter's teacher. We were talking about you last week." So that's the joy and the love and the reward for me of teaching. If you have someone that you've interacted with and years later, they can have some kind of acknowledgement of the positive impact that you had in their life, that's the reward. So CUNY is a great love of mine. I'm always touting it. I think that the opportunities that students can get are immeasurable in terms of what they can have to pay for in other settings. So I have a great love for CUNY.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things that our students do, I mean, and you don't see this other places, we see students work when I went to medical school, most medical schools, you'll never see a medical student having a job outside of studying. And so they work really hard to get where they are.
They do.
And so your example.
Of the students in the class of 2028, can you disaggregate the demographic makeup by gender, by residency in terms of those who came from New York City high school and have individuals self-identify? If you don't have it now.
I do have it.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so 62% of the class are women, or identify as being female. 75% of them, almost 50%, are Black African American. 27% are Hispanic Latinx. almost 60% of them are sons and daughters of immigrants, and 11% are immigrants themselves. 73%, almost 75% are from the 5 boroughs of New York City. And I know that you'll particularly be interested in Brooklyn. So 16% come from Brooklyn. 26, which is the highest, come from Manhattan. And then we're followed closely by Queens at 20%.
Thank you.
Then there's another students who are from Long Island, upstate New York, and Westchester. We have about 2%. We've opened to out-of-state students, and 2% of the cohort are out-of-state students. So that's actually pretty impressive, which really speaks to our message getting out there.
Thank you. And also, do you have any data on students who self-identify as having any disability?
So great question. I don't have that data. If they would have done, they would have claimed that through City College of New York. So we've not had people ask for accommodations. So we make the assumption, which are always a little dangerous, that they're not anyone with disabilities. I've actually came in asking that question, and we'll be specifically looking for that data.
And we can follow up with that information.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So not unlike people of color, the LGBTQ plus individuals regularly face barriers at accessing the appropriate and comprehensive healthcare. And moreover, healthcare trainees report few training opportunities and low levels of preparedness to care for LGBTQ patients. How is CSUM working to address such gender inequities in its admissions process?
Oh, great. We don't ask about sexual orientation. We just don't. We, as I mentioned in my earlier testimony, we, prior to the admissions committee doing its work for their first meeting, we have a lecture on implicit bias, unconscious bias. We also have a robust conflict of interest policy as well. So we don't look at that issue. We don't discriminate against that issue of LGBTQ. We try to create an inclusive and welcoming environment for all. I want to make sure. Am I asking your question?
Yes. But additionally, how is it reflected in the training that you give to your students?
Yeah, so we have implicit, from the very first year that they come in, they have, the students are taught about implicit bias. They have a robust, I think that's one of the places that we're a leader in the social determinants of health, where people work, live, play, and pray, their sex, their orientation. So all that comes out in the curriculum throughout the 7 years. And they taught about health disparities, and one of the health disparities, as you mentioned, is about people who are LGBTQ.
And I should also say that, we call this the CUNY School of Medicine at City College, but explicitly at the undergraduate level, these are City College students, and we think of the medical students as City College students as well. So on the campus, we have a gender resource center. We also have an LGBTQ center that was recently cited by the university as one of the most advanced in the university system. And this does the whole range of support, including now, for instance, the ability to link LGBTQ students to job opportunities and internships where they will be mentored by people from their community. So there are robust resources. It doesn't speak to the curriculum in the CSUM, but it does speak to the environment of support that a student can access on our campus.
Thank you. And we also have questions also related to the demographics. The ones that I first asked were for the class of 2028, and we'd like to have that same information, race, ethnicity, gender, New York City residency, and any who might identify as having a disability for particularly the entire program of BSMD, as well as for the physician's assistant program. So,
And you know, we can talk you through it, but that's also in the appendices that Dean Green submitted.
Okay.
As part of her testimony.
Okay, so
There's really robust data there if
Okay.
you have a chance to go through.
I will, I certainly will. How many students are currently in each cohort of the 7 years BSMD program?
It ranges from, the 75 to the 90. Some students, I'm looking for that number here, but it goes up and down. Some students will delay, some people take a gap year. Some people, so one of the things that we're working on, Chair, is, how do we normalize so recognize we're taking in 17 and 18-year-old students.
Yes.
Thank you very much. They're amazing, but they're 17 and 18 years old, and they will graduate, all things go well, by the time they're 24. They go through lots of developmental stages and developmental changes during that period of time. And so we also want to normalize the conversation about, in most places, it takes 4 years to get your bachelor's degree,
Right.
or 5 years, taking the victory lap. So we're thinking about, how we can normalize it such that, one, students have other opportunities to, maybe get a master's along the way, or get an MD, PhD. As you know, the number of people who have MDs and PhDs who are Black, Latinx is woefully low. We also want to think about alternatives in. So we're going to see some fluctuations up and down, depending on where students are. Some students, people think, oh, well, it's academic. Well, some people actually do leave, even though they're doing extremely well academically, because of finances. And I met someone like that recently but that student will be coming back. So the financial, family finances.
What supports academic or otherwise are students in your programs, BSMD, as well as physician's assistant?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part of your question, Chair.
Yes, what supports other, besides academic, well, both academic and otherwise, are offered to students in your programs, the BSMD program, as well as the physician assistant program?
Well, great. So one of the things that I'm really very proud of is our pre-matriculation program, which is, an opportunity for students to come, get oriented, learn some things prior to actually beginning their bachelor's program. I am excited about potentially adding some more things to that program. And so that, I've only been here 2 months, but that's one of the things I would like to add to. It's been very successful, extremely successful. And I think it could be a national model. With that being said, I'd like to actually make that to a point where it really gets to be mandatory. Why? Because I think we live better in community. I think it'll give students an opportunity to be exposed to research. It also gives them an opportunity to be exposed to wellness, meaning, our advisors can know a student better. And when they get to have challenges like a parent dies or something, that we know how to better help them. So that's one of our big programs. And, really exposing them to research. We think we can actually change the pipeline as it relates to the biomedical PhD, master's prepared person. Wellness, we really focus. I have a firm, I've published on this topic as of last year, as it relates to wellness, as it relates to particularly Black and Brown students. And so that's an area that one of my top priorities, or I would say my top priority, is to make certain that my students are well and healthy and ready for duty. And then secondly, our faculty and staff. We have a learning resource center that's robust. All it takes is sometimes for the dean to say, I want you to not wait. If you don't pass this exam, or you think you're go to the Learning Resource Center. So I said that, and now we've had a run on the Learning Resource Center, and we may have to make some changes there in regards to bringing in some additional people, just because I said it's okay to ask for help. So those are some of the things that we're doing there.
Thank you. Can you describe the process? I'm sure you can. Please describe for us the process by which students transfer from the BS portion of the program to the MD portion? And are they automatically accepted? Is there a rate of acceptance that's less than 100%? What accounts for that?
Yeah. So once you're accepted into the BS program, you're automatically accepted into the MD program, presuming that you've met the academic and the professionalism criteria. So there's not an exam. There's no MCAT. So some schools that have accelerated programs students still have to take an MCAT. They have to sit there and take it. Not that they have to pass it, they have to take it. We don't require that. So our students actually start being introduced. They start going out into the clinics in the third year of the undergraduate experience. They get a little white coat and start working in federally qualified health centers. So some parts of our work is really seamless.
And what is the grade GPA, or what is the standard that you require or expect a student to have gained before going into the MD?
We expect them to pass.
Okay,
the
so
classes.
it's pass-fail.
Yeah, well, for the undergraduate component, there may be some grades associated. We expect people to pass, so I'll just reiterate, this is a professional school. And we're allowing people to go out and graduate who will be touching people, prescribing medications. So we expect people to pass and to have the knowledge, based upon our curriculum, and then as they go through the national licensure exams.
And just to clarify, there are 2 national licensure exams that they take, a step 1 and a step 2. These are national exams, and like any other medical student in the country, our students pass the first one before they can go into clinic, and they pass the second one before they can, I don't know, is it to graduate, Carmen, or? Well,
no, it's not to graduate. So lots of schools do this a little bit differently, but they have to pass what we call the USMLE prior to going to the clinical years. And then they take another exam to make certain that they are proficient in the clinical expert. So that now that those exams have now gone to pass fail. Prior to that, our numbers, as far as pass fail, our numbers are the same as the national average.
Right.
In fact, even a little better.
Right.
And our attrition rate,
Right.
which I think you're probably, is essentially the same as the national average.
And do you do a survey, or do you have data on why it is that a student may not continue and go into the MD portion?
Yeah, so I'm actually looking at trying to enhance some of our data collection. I mean, we can do a better job in that area. I mean, we've got some basic data, I changed my mind. I don't like this. Sometimes it could be financial. We're going to do, I would like for us to have a better knowledge base as it relates to who transitions in or out. And I think that, and let's also be clear, this is an accelerated bachelor's program where our students aren't, so there's also just the stress. So again, not every person is ready for an accelerated 7-year program. And they may not find, sometimes mom, dad said, you should be a doctor. Granddad says you should be a doctor, but you find out, I don't really want to be a doctor. So those things come into play.
Thank you. Moving to the area of post-graduation. At the last hearing the committee had on CSUM, which was in 2017, CUNY had recently announced a campaign to raise $20 million in interest-free loans for the inaugural BSMD class. What is the status of this campaign?
Great question. I saw that. That was under a dean who is no longer here. And so we have not met that goal. There will be new goals.
Is it something that you're aiming to do? Is it still something that's live?
Well, I'm putting together a complete strategic plan. and vision as to what's needed for this school, right? As also as it relates to diversity. And so we will be able to sort of say, these are the goals for raising dollars to help support, our healers and leaders. So unfortunately, those goals were not met. And I think that's in part because, you had a dean who was here for a very short period. I don't know how long he was here, but he was here. And then you had an interim dean, and now you've got me. And so we're going to be setting some goals. My goal is to, under promise and over deliver, because our students, our goals should be as high as the aspirations of our students.
And let me also say, and this is something that the dean and I have had extensive conversations about. The medical school from the beginning had its own fundraising capacity, but in my conversations with the old dean, I was insistent in saying, this is not an operation that's worthy of the medical school. Yeah. And I believe there are a few things where we have underperformed, where we have punched below our potential than philanthropic fundraising for CSUM and for all the schools in CUNY. I mean, so Dr. Green has already, in her first 2 months, with my full support, made some personnel changes on the development side. But she is really, there's no other way to say this. This school was founded with not a dollar in the tank philanthropically. So they were from the beginning going from a standing start and haven't gotten off the line. So I imagine a huge part of the work that we will be doing in collaboration, and I'll say it's already started, is to get the kind of philanthropic operation that is worthy of this school's potential going. And I think we've got a great fundraiser in the person of the new dean.
Thank you, President Boudreau. And I would also just say, Chair, we need to invest in these students who will be investing their careers and their lives to this community. And that's my goal. So, there's some infrastructure things that I'm addressing, but making certain my students are healthy and well, but then my next big priority is philanthropy. And I think it really does come about by telling the story. And we're not asking people to give us money, we're asking people to invest in us. So.
Thank you. But I would, if you could please summarize how much money, and perhaps the president would be able to give that to us. How much money was raised of that 20 million? Were students given any loans from that amount? And what were the criteria? Could they use it in any way that they wanted? And just to let us know financially what happened with that sum of money, we would appreciate.
Yeah, no, very, very little had been raised. I think $1 million is a recent gift. The other source of scholarship money that the students have, you may remember, Chair, that there is something that we call the commitment fund. Yes. And so that, the CUNY Board of Trustees several years ago allowed us to use that for scholarships. That money, when they made that decision, we had about $7 million in commitment funds. And so students were getting up to $20,000 scholarship grants, and it was need-based. But as the dean said, fully 50% of our students have, no family contribution. So the need is robust and extensive. I will say that we have had a number of people under Dr. Green's tenure in the last 2 months reach out with a real interest in investing in the students. And so we're hopeful to move forward, but there has been virtually nothing raised against that goal.
Mm-hmm.
So next year, when you ask us to come back, hopefully we'll have some good news for you.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I won't be in this position because my term is ending in December, and it's the end of what we restricted to 2 terms. So this is the end of my 2nd term, but hopefully there'll be a person coming behind me, you know, that's all political, who gets those chairs. But hopefully it'll be someone who's been there before as a chair and who knows and has a background in CUNY and will be able to follow up in that regard.
But I'll say we'll still be pleased to engage you on anything you're curious about,
Okay, thank you.
wherever you are, whenever you want.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank
We'll
you.
send you a Zoom link if needed.
Okay, thank you. I'll do that. Moving to the area of diversity and inclusion. According to the Dean's Initiative, which was last updated October 16, 2018, on City College's website, CSUM has undertaken a proactive approach to ensure that it, quote, has an environment that celebrates diversity and is inclusive and welcoming. This includes the regular administration of a culture and climate survey with a committee to review, track, and report results with implementable recommendations for improvement. How many such surveys as that have been administered, and what's the return rate, and what recommendations for improvement have come out of these surveys since they have been implemented?
Well, another great question. So again, that dean came and is gone. There was a survey that was administered. My understanding, it was very low response rate, so it makes this validity problematic. There are a number of initiatives that have things that have occurred in response to, as you know, I don't need to educate you on the racial profiling of Black and brown people, the premature deaths of Black and brown people. There have been vigils, there's been protests. Our students are really very engaged and interested in the social determinants of health. They, unlike, I would say medicine has lacked advocacy, right? As it relates to the whole conversation of racism as a virus. Our students don't lack that conversation. And so we embrace that. With that being said, all this diversity initiative needs to be reworked and redone for a new generation. I will tell you, and you may not have know this, is that at Michigan, at the University of Michigan, I was the inaugural Associate Vice President and Associate Dean for Health, Equity, and Inclusion. And so within that, I was also the Chief Diversity Officer. So we will put together something that is extremely robust. We did go through a process of hiring an assistant dean who was just stolen away by another institution. Actually, her family is there, so it's not really a steal, but we're still sad about it. But we're now we have Dr. Sandy Santong in that role as assistant dean for diversity. And I really feel that as the dean of this medical school, and as any dean of a medical school, we should be the person who's the chief diversity and inclusion officer, and making certain that our climate is welcoming and inclusive. So we've got work to do, just like every medical school.
Here a list of questions that actually, as I'm looking at them, do relate to the Dean's Initiative. And as we've indicated, that person is no longer there. So I will pass these questions and just ask you generally. You did mention that you have a strategic plan, or that you're forming a strategic plan for the school. And so we would just ask at what stage you are. Is it completed, or can we have can we expect it? And of course, I know it will be an ongoing process, but just in terms of what your intentions or your expectations or plans are in that regard.
Yeah, so great question. So I would say that I wouldn't have come here if I weren't excited. I really do believe that this is the most important medical school. The story hasn't been told, and it is a national treasure. There are schools that are considered to be much more prestigious, have more NIH dollars. more federal funding, but there's no school that is more important. And I would say that's more relevant. And most schools, medical schools, focus on, you know, how many NIH dollars can I get? Not really thinking about it, their communities. In fact, no medical school has improved disparities in their communities. In fact, we aren't even ranked by that. By U.S. News and World Report. They just started thinking about incorporating the conversation as it relates to diversity. If they were to do that, we'd probably be in the top 5 in the country in regards to diversity. So those are things that are key components of how I move forward. I have given you in your appendices some key talking points that I have used to start thinking about what the visioning. Those come from when I was interviewing, a little bit refined. Once I've been here, recognize I've only been here 2 months, but I've been doing a lot of thinking. It's always a little dangerous to put some things out when you haven't at least been here. But I have started working on a vision statement and a strategic planning process. The key thing is to get to the point where it's actually the holiday season where I can have a little bit of uninterrupted time. You know, I thought we were going to be able to get this done in Thanksgiving. And then, you know what? Chair Barron called me. I don't know if you know her, said, we would like for you to come and spend a little quality time with the New York City Council, and we welcome that. So it's going to take a little bit, but we, you know, those slides that I've given you really do tell you, it's page 67, I think, which it really, and I can walk you through that if you would like, you know, really tell you kind of how I'm thinking about this. You know, how are we the national exemplar? Where can we be the national exemplar? I'm focusing on a relevant type of leadership, not what everybody else talks about, but how can we be the difference maker, and how can we be, and I think we can do that as it relates to, 1, creating a culture of wellness, 2, by diversifying the pipeline, investing in our human capital, 3, really thinking about, are you with me?
Yes, I am. I'm listening to you. I don't have it in front of me.
Okay.
That's
So, yeah, so how can we reduce disparities in our time? So I talk about our mission, and again, this has not been, you know, really to unlock and cultivate the full potential within our excellent, diverse, and inclusive community of healers and leaders. We refer to ourselves as the CUNY School of Medicine, home of the healers and leaders. No one else thinks that way. And we leverage the transformative power of compassion and empathy to improve the human condition. And we do this through our educational, research, scholarship initiatives. And that will have a lasting impact on the community and a cadre of physicians who are also healers and leaders. And then I talk a little bit about, you know, my first priority is increase our impact and footprint. And so our branding, you know, Chair Barron, you know, when I first came to this community, I asked people about the CUNY School of Medicine. People didn't know it existed. Mm-hmm. It's time that changes, and it will change. Trust me on that. How can we be a leader in the educational and research arenas? And so we'll be putting some infrastructure and starting to think strategically about where we will make, we've got, you know, people say we're resource poor. I would say we're resource constrained. We don't have a lot of excess, but we can make a difference in the NIH. And we've been charging people with, you know, our associate dean for research to come up with that. We're going to be recruiting a couple of faculty who can actually help with that to help generate additional NIH dollars or other federal dollars, but also foundation dollars, and also to help develop junior faculty and student research. So we're excited about that. But again, we need to have people who are willing to invest in us. And then, you know, investing in human capital. You know, I talk about this, you know, we're thinking about how do we create an environment where everyone can be successful. And I talked about research. Now, the other thing is the whole, so most people talk about a tripartite mission. I talk about the quadripartite mission, the clinical, the education, the research, and the social mission. What good is research if it sits on the shelf? How do we disseminate research into policy that makes people healthier? So part of that is the social mission. And so those are the things I'm thinking about in the strategic plan. Then it comes down to a conversation about what the infrastructure needs are and how do we make the operations efficient and effective? I think if we become wealthy, ultra wealthy, we lose sight of the goal, right? But we do need to have investments. We need to have clinical, how do we grow those clinical spaces for clerkships? Many schools in this city pay for clerkships, and then the Caribbean schools come in and pay for clerkships. We can't afford to do that. We just can't without passing that on to students who already have an unequal burden. So, we're looking for like-minded partners who embrace the fact that we are here to serve the people, that we as healers and leaders are here to serve. And so embrace that, recognizing that our students will stay in this community, will stay in New York, and they'll disproportionately serve in health physician shortage areas. They're disproportionately going to primary care, and not by a little bit in comparison to the other New York schools. So the vision will reflect that, and it'll reflect the resources we need to get there, and we will become a national exemplar. The question is not if, it's just a matter of when. Okay, and with the right resources, it becomes much sooner. And I told you, I mentioned to you, I have a growth mindset. I think we can be bigger and bolder, and we can be known for what we do. And to the extent that we do that, we lift all boats. We want, Chair, we want you, you're a proud CUNY alum. That shows, that really shows, and it gives me goosebumps. With that being said, this is your medical school. This is our medical school. This is New York City's medical school. And so we want everyone to be proud of that. And that's my job.
Thank you. I do want to announce that Councilmember Rodriguez, and we're glad he is a member of the committee, and we're glad that he had joined us. You've been here for 2 hours. Ooh. And time flies. And I just have one additional question, and it relates particularly, I think, to the area of finance. I believe, President Boudreaux, you talked about some financial burdens or hurdles when you made your remarks. And we're hearing now about the resources, the constrained resources. So my last question relates to finance. And what is the relationship between CUNY School of Medicine, which I heard the president said has its own funding, its own financial plan? Mm-hmm. So what is that relationship, and who has authority over them? And given the pandemic and all of the needs that it has exposed, particularly as it relates to doctors and nurses shortages, how are we protecting the integrity of the funding, essentially meant to increase the number of professional healthcare? And that's my final question.
Okay, and I want to say, if my laptop dies, I've got my phone all set to tap in. I'm in that 3-4% range. So a couple of things. A requirement for accreditation is the dean of a medical school must have control over her budget, and so we have ensured that. There's really no way to sugarcoat this. The medical school today is essentially a tuition-driven institution. The annual contribution of the state to our medical school, I can get the exact number, but it's somewhere around $3 or $4 million, as opposed to the 12 point something million dollars that come in tuition. When the other medical schools in the public university system of the state of New York were founded, and they were founded decades before the CSUM was founded, there was something called the capitation program. And what that meant was dollar for dollar tuition was matched by the state. So if we had a $12 million revenue from student tuition, there would be $12 million from the state. That program ended before it ended actually in the 1990s. And so there was, and none of us were involved in the plans to establish the medical school, but there was some hope that the program would be referenced in the state funding formula for the medical school, and it just never was. So we are committed to trying to use philanthropic resources to take the financial burden off our students. The dean has said any number of times that she is running a lean operation, and she is. We'd like it to be less lean, and have a little bit more resources to invest in some of the initiatives that she has. But it really was a change in state funding for medical education that's put us on really different footing than the rest of us. But I will say, you said at the start of this, well,
So I'll just piggyback a little bit while he's flipping over. You know, this is fundamentally an equity issue.
Yes.
And a significant equity issue. First of all, our medical school, because we're so heavily tuition dependent, could actually be cited by the accrediting body because of our tuition dependence. Two, we could also potentially be cited because of the amount of debt our students go out, leave with. So that all those things have to change. And I've talked to you already, not at you, with you about the whole conversation of this is an unequal burden. Mm-hmm. It's not a fairly distributed dollars. It's not fairly, our students are walking out with this debt while others aren't. Mm-hmm. And so our revenue, the accrediting body says we have to have a certain amount of dollars in reserves. And so we can't utilize some of those dollars that we could potentially use, that we would use for infrastructure. Now, I also will take us back to the conversation where we began, and this medical school, I would say, was started. I've never seen this before. They usually are started on like a $50 million, $100 million endowment. Maybe there's $5 million endowment, maybe. So it was an experiment at some level. And I use the analogy of, there was a baby that was left on somebody's and in front of a church. And lo and behold, the baby survived. I would like for the baby to be able to thrive. And so it means to me that this school was supposed to survive, but now it's time for it to thrive. And I think our students, our faculty and staff deserve that. And, we're really, as I said, all these factors, and I don't know what promises were made or not made. And I've actually tried to look at the data to see how much each of the state schools received. I'm not comparing us to Einstein or NYU or Columbia or Weill. How much they receive per head, and in comparison to the need for our students. So I've been told that this may be an upstate downstate issue. I'm not certain what that means, but I think I know what it means. So you'd have to, and I'm certain you're quite capable of educating me on that, but I can tell you that no other medical school, and I would say in this state, and probably nationwide, is as lean, as ultra lean, running a budget off of this size of endowment, which doesn't exist. The commitment funds that you referred to, those go away in 2032. No one will be contributing dollars to that. And so, the finances, I wouldn't call us dire. We have enough money to pay the bills. But as far as to grow, to give our students what they deserve, not just what they need, what they deserve, the opportunities to go to the National Institutes of Health, to do a global medical education track, to pursue master's degree. Let the data speak for itself.
Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it now back to our council, Council Amy Briggs, and after that, if I'll return with my closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Barron. We have now heard from everyone that has signed up to testify, so we appreciate everyone's time and presence. I would like to note that written testimony, which will be reviewed in full by committee staff, may be submitted to the record up to 72 hours after the closing of this hearing by emailing it to testimony@council.nyc.gov. Chair Barron, we unfortunately don't have any other public witnesses registered. So if you would like to make your closing remarks now. I believe
Yes, thank you so much. I first of all want to thank the panel for coming. And I want to say that I'm going to continue to be supportive of CUNY programs and advocate for all of them. And now that we've had this hearing, certainly CSUM is going to be at the top of the list. And I would invite you to reach out to the new council that's coming in, particularly the BLAC, which is the Black, Latino, and Asian Caucus, because usually during February, March, April, we are asked to submit, actually January and February and March, we're asked to submit our priorities to the state for areas that we think should be funded. And I certainly want to encourage you to appeal, perhaps make a brief presentation to the Black, Latino, and Asian Caucus and ask them to list you as one of the issues that they would like to see the state increase your funding. And apply also generally to the full council body, because it's important, I think, that we get the funding that we need, as you say, to grow. And that's what's important. And I agree with you. The branding is something that we want to make sure that people know about, and will certainly further increase our opportunities to pull those students who may not know that right here in New York City, we've got an excellent medical school. I do want to thank you and President Boudreaux for coming and spending this time with us and educating us and telling us about your ideas and your potential for the school. And I want to encourage you to continue. I get a sense of energy that this is really something you're excited about and committed to, and I support that wholeheartedly.
Thank you.
And finally, this is my last hearing. During the time that I've been here, we have had 10 hearings a month. We meet every month, except for July and August. So for each year it's been 10. And I've been here for 8 years, so it's about 80 different hearings that we've had. And the topics have been wonderful and learned a lot. And I just have to give a special shout out to my team. I have to commend my team, the council, the policy analyst, the finance person. All of them do all of the leg work, the grunt work, the behind the scenes work, and just give it to me on a platter. So I just have to use that as a basis moving forward. So I want to commend all of them publicly and tell them how much I appreciate all that you've done. Also adding, of course, Indigo Washington, my CUNY liaison, and my chief of staff. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. It's been an honor. And I'm glad that this was the last one because it's inspirational. It's inspirational. So thank you all. And with that, I declare that this meeting is adjourned, and I've got my shekere, so I'm going to close it with my gavel. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.